Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. You guys sent in some seriously fascinating stuff on trust, especially that summary of Stephen M.R. Covey's book, The Speed of Trust. So we're going to unpack it all today.
You know, it's so interesting how Covey takes this idea of trust, and kind of turns it on its head.
Right.
Yeah, like we usually think of trust as this soft skill, touchy-feely stuff, but he goes and shows how it packs a punch,
Really does.
like a real economic force.
Okay, now break that down for me. What, like trust equals profits? Is that what he's saying?
In a way, yeah. He's arguing that trust directly impacts both speed and cost in every interaction.
So not just warm fuzzies, but like actual bottom line stuff.
Exactly. Imagine you got to micromanage someone you just, don't trust.
Ugh, been
There
there.
are all those extra checks, the back and forth, emails, phone calls, all that.
The trust tax, isn't that what he call it?
You got it. It's wasted time, energy, resources, all hitting your bottom line.
Makes total sense. Like, think about airport security lines after 9/11.
Oh, perfect example.
Sudden lack of trust, and bam, everything slows down. Costs go up for everyone.
Exactly. And the flip side, when you've got tons of trust, things just zoom.
Like that story of Warren Buffett buying a whole company from Walmart in what was it, 2 hours?
2-hour meeting, yeah.
Yeah.
That's trust in action.
It's like he's added this secret ingredient to the business formula.
How so?
Like we always hear, strategy plus execution equals results, right?
Yeah.
But Covey's saying, whoa, hold up, there's this multiplier in there.
And then that multiplier is
Trust. Especially in today's world, global economy, everything's partnerships.
absolutely more interconnected than ever. Got to have trust to make it work.
Okay, so now we're cooking. But trust is kind of slippery, right? How do you even measure it?
Well, that's where Covey brings in this brilliant metaphor, the 5 waves of trust.
Okay, hit me with
He
it.
describes it as ripples, yeah. Starting with you and expanding outwards.
Oh, that ripple effect idea. I like that.
So wave 1, right at the center, self-trust. Can you trust yourself?
That's deep. We often get so hung up on trusting others, we forget to start with ourselves.
So true. Can you trust yourself to do what you say you'll do? That's foundational.
If you can't trust yourself, how can you expect anyone else to?
Right, 100%.
Yeah.
But it's not just a concept. Covey gets down to brass tacks, gives us these 4 cores of credibility.
I'm listening.
To build that self-trust, you got to have these 4 things, starting with integrity.
Not just honesty, right? There's more to it.
Way more. Covey's saying it's walking your talk, humility, courage to do right, even when it's hard.
Aligning your values, words, and actions, even when no one's looking, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And think about it. Have you ever been in a spot where, you promised a client something,
Oh, yeah, all the time.
but deep down you knew you probably couldn't deliver?
Oof, that gap between what you say and what's real, that eats away at you.
Big time. And it erodes trust, both with yourself and with that client down the line.
Domino effect, right?
Exactly. Then you've got the second core, intent. This is all about the why behind what you do.
Like your motivation. Yeah.
Exactly. Covey stresses that your motives got to be transparent, your agenda, your behavior. It all has to reflect genuine intention, not just self-interest.
Makes you think of that stat Covey throws out. Only 42% of employees believe their management actually cares about them.
Yeah. Sad but true.
If people don't trust your intent, that's got to poison the whole workplace.
Absolutely. People pick up on it,
Yeah.
If your motives aren't genuine, good luck building trust.
So we've got integrity, we've got intent. Those are kind of the, character-based cores?
You got it. But there's another side of this. You got to walk the walk too, right?
Ready the receipts.
Haha, exactly. And that's where capabilities and results come in.
Okay, break those down.
Capabilities are about having the chops, the skills, knowledge, whatever you need to actually deliver on those promises.
Makes sense.
Covey even gives this acronym, Task S. Talent, attitudes, skills, knowledge, style.
So it's like a checklist for credibility.
I like that. It's asking, are you actually equipped to do what you set out to do?
But even with all the skills in the world, you still got to deliver the goods, right?
Bingo. The 4th core, results. It's about your track record, past, present, and potential for future success. It's showing you can finish what you start.
Not just talk, but action.
Exactly. It's about taking responsibility, being accountable for the outcome.
Okay, so just to recap for self-trust, I got to be honest, have good intentions, be capable, and actually deliver.
Nailed it. It's an ongoing process for sure.
Sounds like a lot of work.
It is, but it's the bedrock.
Because if you can't trust yourself,
No one else will.
fair enough. But okay, I've built up that inner trust. Now how do I share it? Spread it around.
That's where we hit wave 2, relationship trust. This was all about consistent behavior.
Consistency, that's tough.
For sure. Covey uses this analogy of a trust account.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Every interaction you have, deposit or withdrawal.
Gotta make sure you're in the black, huh?
Exactly. But it's not just about being nice. There are 13 behaviors he outlines.
13, okay, that's a lot to juggle.
It can feel overwhelming, but the key is making them habits.
So it's not about memorizing a list, but actually changing how you act.
Right on. And they stem from both character and competence. Like, take talk straight, for instance.
That just means being honest, right?
It's more than that. It's clear communication, no sugarcoating, being upfront about your intentions.
Ooh, that can be tough sometimes.
It can. But it builds trust way faster in the long run.
There's another one that always gets me. Confront reality.
Oh, yes.
I used to think it meant just being brutally honest, no matter how much it hurts.
Right.
But Covey's saying it's more nuanced.
Definitely.
It's about creating a space where you can be honest, even about tough stuff.
Safe space for dialogue, yeah.
Exactly. And that actually makes people trust you more, not less.
Counterintuitive, but it works. It shows you care enough to tackle the hard stuff head on.
There's another one I really like. It's extend trust. That's it.
Oh, that's a big one. Covey's turning trust from a noun into a verb.
Ooh, I like that. So it's not just something you have, it's something you do.
Yes. Taking that risk, choosing to trust someone, it often makes them want to trust you back.
So powerful. But that raises a question for me. Isn't that risky? What if you get burned?
Totally valid question. That's where Covey brings in the smart trust matrix.
Okay, fill me in.
It's not about trusting blindly, right? It's about good judgment, figuring out who to trust and how much.
So it's like calculated risk, not just throwing caution to the wind.
Exactly. The matrix helps you analyze the situation, the person, the level of risk involved.
So you're being intentional, not reckless.
Right. And Covey actually argues that not trusting can be the riskier move in business.
Oh, really? How so?
You miss out on opportunities, slow everything down.
Makes you think. So we've covered self-trust and relationship trust, those inner waves.
The foundation.
But how does all this play out in the bigger picture, like in companies or even society as a whole?
That's where those outer waves come in. Organizational trust, market trust, and societal trust.
Building on that foundation we've talked about.
Exactly, that ripple effect in action.
So the trust we build within ourselves and with each other actually impacts how much trust there is in companies and even the whole world.
Powerful, right?
It is. So let's dive into these outer waves a bit, starting with organizational trust. What makes a company, truly trustworthy?
Covey puts a lot of emphasis on alignment.
Alignment.
Yeah, making sure the system structures, even symbols, all reinforce trust.
So it's not just about what you say, but what you actually do as a company.
100%. It's stuff like transparent communication, fair performance reviews, leaders who actually walk the walk.
Creating a culture of trust top to bottom.
Precisely. Think about those companies with massive employee handbooks, tons of rules and regulations.
Oh, yeah, seen those.
Often that signals, we don't trust you.
Interesting. What would be the opposite of that?
Imagine a CEO who's like, hey, company's going through tough times. I'm refusing my raise.
Wow. Powerful statement.
Right. Actions speak louder than words.
Okay, so that's organizational trust. What about market trust? How does that work?
Market trust is all about reputation. It's that feeling people have about a company that makes them want to do business with them, invest in them, recommend them to others.
So it's building a brand that people feel good about.
Exactly. Transparency, ethical practices, consistently delivering on promises, all that stuff.
Like eBay, they thrive on transparency, letting you see everything, the good, the bad.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
They built trust by being open.
Then you've got companies like, Nike. They had those issues with sweatshops.
Right.
And they had to work hard to rebuild trust, prove they were serious about ethical sourcing and all that.
It's fascinating how trust can be built or broken by seemingly small things.
It's a constant process.
Well, for sure. Maintaining that trust, earning it back if you lose it, it's an ongoing effort.
Okay, we've talked organizations, we've talked markets, but societal trust, that's a big one, almost abstract.
It is huge. But at its core, it's about contribution.
Contribution. Meaning?
Individuals, organizations, working to create value for society as a whole, fostering that sense of shared responsibility.
So like philanthropy, companies doing social good.
That's part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
But it can also be just being a good citizen,
Yeah.
doing your part.
So every little bit counts.
Every ripple spreads outwards. Think Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yeah, massive impact.
They're building trust on a global scale.
That's inspiring. To think we can all play a part in making a more trusting world.
One interaction at a time. We've just scratched the surface of Covey's work today. There's so much more to explore.
This has been a great start, though. We've covered a lot of ground, those 5 waves, the 13 behaviors, the 4 cores of credibility.
It's a lot to take in, but it shows just how deeply trust is woven into every aspect of our lives.
It really does. And before we move on, I want to pause and ask you, dear listener, where do you see the biggest opportunity to build trust in your own life?
That's a good question. And building on that, what's one small step you could take today, based on what we've talked about so far?
Keep those questions in mind as we continue our exploration of the speed of trust.
It's funny, when you think about those 5 ways of trust, they're not really separate, are they?
You're right. It's not like you check one off and move on to the next.
Exactly. More like they all kind of feed into each other.
An ecosystem.
Yes! Perfect word for it.
So, like, take societal trust, that big one.
Mm-hmm.
If nobody trusts institutions, government, all that, it's got to be way harder to build trust in companies, right? Even between people.
Absolutely. It's like distrust breeds more distrust.
A downward spiral.
Exactly. But the good news is the reverse is also true.
Oh, you mean if you build trust somewhere, it can have a ripple effect?
Exactly. Like working on your own self-trust can actually make your whole workplace a little more trusting.
Whoa. So it's not just about focusing on one wave at a time?
Nope. They're all connected.
That's what makes Covey stuff so cool. He gives you this whole framework for how trust works.
And not just theory. He gives you tools to actually build it.
Right. Speaking of tools, there's that whole section on restoring trust. Because, let's face it, trust gets broken.
Happens all the time.
Relationships, companies, even whole countries, right?
Unfortunately, yeah.
And it feels like once that trust is gone, it's gone.
It's tough, for sure.
But Covey says it's almost always possible to rebuild it.
Almost always, yeah. And he gives you concrete steps.
Okay, so say I messed up. I broke someone's trust.
Happens to the best of us.
Where do I even start to fix that? What's step 1?
First thing is, you got to own it.
Own it.
Acknowledge the breach. No more hiding.
So no excuses, no trying to justify it.
Nope. Take responsibility. Show you understand the impact of your actions.
And apologize.
Yes. But it's got to be a real apology, not just lip service.
Like, how do you make it real?
Well, it depends on the situation, right?
Yeah.
But it could mean making amends, changing your behavior.
So it's not just words, but actions.
Exactly. Got to show that you've learned and you're serious about not doing it again.
Like, remember that Nike example?
With the sweatshops.
Yeah. They didn't just say, oops, sorry. They had to actually change how they did business.
Right. Proving they were serious about ethical practices.
Takes time, though.
Rebuilding trust is a process, no quick fixes.
And what about forgiveness? Does that play a role?
Huge role. Holding on to resentment, bitterness, that just keeps the distrust alive.
So you gotta let go.
If you want to move forward, yeah.
It can be hard.
It can. Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself.
Ooh, that's deep.
We've all been there, right?
Yeah.
Where we let ourselves down and it's like, how do I ever trust myself again?
Totally. Covey's saying self-forgiveness is key.
We're human. We make mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them.
And that learning, that becoming a better person, that actually strengthens your self-trust in the long run.
Exactly. Turns those mistakes into fuel for growth.
Love that. So restoring trust, whether it's with ourselves, with someone else, or in a whole company, it's a journey.
A journey. Yeah. It takes time. It takes effort.
And a willingness to be vulnerable. Right. Admit you messed up.
Vulnerability is key. But the payoff is huge.
Because when you restore trust, you can actually build even stronger relationships than before.
It's true. Stronger relationships, more effective teams, even a more just and fair society.
It's like the opposite of that downward spiral we talked about.
Exactly. A virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
Trust building on trust.
This is inspiring stuff. And it makes me think about leadership. How does trust play into that?
Oh, Covey has a lot to say about that. He basically redefines what it means to be a leader.
Oh, really? How so?
He says the most effective leaders are the ones who can inspire and extend trust.
So it's not about being the loudest or the bossiest.
Nope. It's about creating an environment where people feel safe, valued, empowered to do their best work.
Lead by example, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And it starts with the leader themselves. They got to be trustworthy, competent, actually care about their team.
So if the leader does that, it trickles down to the whole team.
It's like a ripple effect. People start trusting each other more, they collaborate better, they take risks because they know they've got a supportive leader.
Creates a positive feedback loop.
Exactly. Trust breeds more trust, which leads to better results, more innovation.
And a more successful company. But does this only apply to CEOs and managers? Can anyone be a trust leader?
That's a great question. And I think Covey would say yes, absolutely.
So it's not about your job title, it's about how you act.
Exactly. Anyone in a position of influence can be a trust leader, a team leader, a community organizer, a parent, even just a friend.
So it's about recognizing that we all have the potential to lead and that trust is key to making a positive impact.
Beautifully said. And one thing that really stuck with me is Covey's idea that extending trust is itself an act of leadership.
Interesting. How so?
It's not about being naive. It's about making a conscious choice to believe in someone, to empower them.
It's like flipping the script on how we usually think about trust.
Right. Instead of how do I protect myself from getting hurt, it's how can I help this person succeed?
That's a huge shift.
It is. And a lot of leaders get stuck in that fear of being taken advantage of.
Makes sense. There's always that risk.
There is. But Covey argues that extending trust is actually a low-risk, high-reward move.
Interesting. Why is that?
Because when people feel trusted, they're more likely to rise to the occasion.
It's like you're giving them permission to shine.
Exactly. And that creates a more positive and productive environment for everyone.
So it's not just about being nice, it's actually a smart strategy.
Absolutely. But you got to be smart about it, right? We can't just trust anyone blindly.
That's where that smart trust matrix comes in again.
We got it. It's about using discernment.
Discernment meaning.
Assessing the situation, the person involved, the level of risk.
So finding that balance between being too trusting and being too suspicious.
Exactly. It's a skill. You get better at it with practice.
I'm sure we've all had times where we trusted the wrong person.
It happens. But the key is to learn from those experiences.
Don't let them make you cynical or closed off.
Right. Keep that balance between wisdom and openness.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into the speed of trust, I want to ask you, dear listener, where do you see opportunities to build trust in your own life?
What relationships could use a little boost? What situations make you feel less than trusting?
And what steps can you take, based on what we've discussed today, to become a more trusting person, a more trusting leader?
Building trust is a journey. It's not something you achieve overnight.
But it's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely. The rewards are immense.
When we cultivate trust, we create a more positive, productive, and fulfilling world for ourselves and everyone around us.
What could be better than that?
And you mentioned Covey gives a lot of practical advice, specific techniques for building trust. What are some things that stood out to you?
Oh, so many. But one thing that really resonated with me was his emphasis on transparency.
Transparency, meaning
Being open and honest even when it's hard.
like telling people bad news, admitting when you made a mistake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He gives these examples of companies like Google and Zappos. They have this culture of radical transparency.
Radical transparency.
You're like, employees have access to almost all information.
Wow. That's a lot of trust, but I can see how it would create an incredible sense of, like, we're all in this together.
It's powerful, but it requires a lot of vulnerability from everyone.
Makes sense. And it's not just about sharing information, it's about being real, genuine in your interactions.
Right. Covey talks about talking straight, saying what you mean, no hidden agendas.
Just being upfront.
Exactly. It's about building real human connections based on honesty and respect.
Another thing that stood out to me was clarifying expectations.
Ah, yes. So important.
Because I think so many conflicts come from, like, misaligned expectations.
Right. When you don't communicate clearly what you need from each other.
Exactly. But if you're clear up front, it sets a foundation of trust and accountability.
Like that saying, assume makes an ass out of you and me.
Uh-huh. So true. And Covey also talks about righting wrongs, which kind of goes back to what we were saying about restoring trust.
It all ties together.
He emphasizes taking responsibility for your mistakes, making amends.
Showing that you're accountable for your actions.
And that applies to everything, right? Personal relationships, how companies operate, even how societies function.
It's a fundamental principle.
Mm.
And it's so relevant today in a world where it feels like trust is in short supply.
You know, it's interesting to think about how Covey's work has influenced me personally.
Oh, me too.
I find myself being more mindful of how I interact with people, more intentional about building trust.
Same here.
Yeah.
I'm definitely more aware of the impact of my words and actions on others.
It's a process, for sure, but it feels like it's making a difference.
It is. And one of the things that makes Covey's work so powerful is that he doesn't just say trust is important. He gives you a way to make it happen.
He gives you tools, techniques, real-world examples.
It's like a roadmap for creating a better life.
It really is. And I think What I appreciate most is that he acknowledges that trust is a choice.
It's not something that just happens to you.
You can choose to be trusting even when you've been hurt in the past.
It's so empowering. And that choice, that willingness to be vulnerable, it can change everything.
It can open up possibilities, create connections that wouldn't have existed otherwise.
It's truly transformative.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the speed of trust, we encourage you to reflect on your own experiences with trust.
What are some key takeaways that resonated with you?
What challenges do you face in building trust?
And how can you apply Covey's principles to overcome those challenges?
Remember, every act of trust, no matter how small, can create a ripple effect.
And those ripples spreading outward can change the world.
So we leave you with this final thought. What one small act of trust can you commit to today?
It could be giving someone the benefit of the doubt, expressing appreciation to a colleague, or just listening with an open heart.
Building trust is a journey, not a destination.
And it's a journey we can all take together.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you're feeling inspired to embrace the power of trust in your own life. Until next time, keep diving.
You know, one thing that really struck me about Covey's book is how practical it is.
It is, right? It's not just some theory. He actually gives you tools and stuff, like real advice.
Yeah, like those 13 behaviors, right?
Yeah.
Those are things you can actually start doing today.
Totally. And he gives all these examples of how trust plays out in like real companies and stuff.
It makes it so much more relatable, right? It's not just some abstract concept.
Definitely. And it's inspiring too, because it shows that building trust is possible, even in like really tough situations.
It is. It gives you hope.
It does. And for me, one of the biggest takeaways is that trust is a choice.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
Well, like we're not just victims of circumstance, you know? We actually have the power to choose to be trusting.
Even when we've been hurt before.
Exactly. Which can be hard.
Oh, for sure. It takes courage.
It does. But Covey's saying it's worth it.
It totally is.
Yeah.
Because when you choose to trust, you open yourself up to all these amazing possibilities.
Better relationships, better opportunities, all that.
Exactly. And it's not just about other people. It's about trusting yourself, too.
Oh, right. That self-trust we were talking about.
Yeah. Believing in yourself, your abilities, your judgment.
And when you trust yourself, you're more likely to take risks, try new things.
You're more confident, more resilient.
It's like this positive feedback loop, right? The more you trust yourself, the more you achieve, the more you have to trust yourself.
Exactly. It builds on itself.
So for anyone listening who's struggling with trust, whether it's trusting themselves or trusting others, Covey's book is like a toolbox.
It really is. He gives you so many practical strategies and techniques.
Like, remember that SMART trust matrix we were talking about? That's a great tool for assessing risk and making informed decisions about who to trust.
And there's that whole section on restoring trust, which I think is so important because, let's be real, we all make mistakes.
We do. We mess up. We let people down.
It happens. But Covey shows you how to own up to those mistakes, make amends, and rebuild that trust.
And it's not just about apologizing. It's about changing your behavior.
Right. Showing through your actions that you're serious about earning back that trust.
It takes time, effort, and a willingness to be vulnerable.
It does. But it's worth it.
Because when you restore trust, you often end up with even stronger relationships than you had before.
It's true. It's like that Japanese art of kintsugi where they repair broken pottery with gold.
Oh, I love that.
The cracks become part of the object's beauty and history.
So it's not about erasing the past. It's about integrating it into something even stronger.
Exactly. And I think that's a beautiful metaphor for how trust works in relationships.
It is. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the speed of trust, we hope you're feeling inspired to explore the power of trust in your own life.
Remember, building trust is a journey, not a destination.
It takes consistent effort, mindfulness, and a willingness to be open and vulnerable.
But the rewards are immeasurable.
When we cultivate trust, we create a more positive, productive, and fulfilling world for ourselves and for everyone around us.
And that's something worth striving for, don't you think?
Absolutely. So we leave you with this final thought. What one small act of trust can you commit to today? Could you give someone the benefit of the doubt, express appreciation to a colleague, or simply listen to a loved one with an open heart? Every act of trust, no matter how small, has the power to make a difference. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the speed of trust. Until next time, keep diving.